Hey, everyone. I'm Katie McGregor Bennett, your host of AV Trade Talk. We've got another very special episode here tonight for you. Well, it's tonight where we are. Wait, no, it's tonight where I am.
Morning.
It's tomorrow morning where they are. That's the beauty of podcasting, is it doesn't matter what time it is where I am or where you are. This is another episode in the series sponsored by Chords, Mastering Connectivity. This is HDMI 2.2 specifications that have been recently announced. What does that mean? We have gathered two of my favorite friends from Chords. James and Ben are here to bring it all into view to us and explain what it means. James, Ben, thanks for joining us today, tonight, tomorrow, all the things. Thanks for joining us. James, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, share a little bit about what you do for Chords and who you are in the world. And then Ben, if you would, follow him in, and then we'll kick off into the topic du jour.
Hi, everyone. My name's James Chen. I'm the Managing Director of Chords. We're a cable manufacturing company that's specifically manufactures for professional integrators. When I'm not doing that, I'm volunteering for CEDIA and helping write white papers and things like that. Currently on RP22, I'm a CEDIA fellow, and I'm also currently on the board of directors as the CEDIA secretary.
Hey everyone, name's Ben. Happy to be here again. Thanks, Katie, for having us. I am Chords' operations director. I'm in charge of product development and also all the other things that needs to get done. When I'm not doing this, I am scuba diving, or I'm also volunteering on the CEDIA certification commission. So, lots of fun, lots of good stuff there. All right.
And thank you guys both on behalf of the industry for all of the volunteer work that you do. It is incredibly time consuming, but it's so important to moving our industry forward. And that is hand on heart. Just thank you for all that you do. It takes a village, as they say. Oh, well, one of the volunteer committee conversations that's been taking place for quite some time and now has moved on to a much more prominent global scale is HDMI 2.2 and the recently announced specifications, which very, very hot off the press recently. So for those of you on the listener side, this is what you're going to be hearing as part of this episode, or will be very, very fresh, very new and recently released. There will be some sources that we're citing as we're going through the conversation here that we'll follow up towards the end with where to find that information, then of course where to go to learn more about the topic in general. So I have paper and pencil handy if that's your thing, or just be ready to pause and play so you can make your notes however you do that. Lots of good info coming right up. So James, Ben, I'll let you guys this conversation will sort of unfold naturally. This isn't really a Q&A, so to speak, with your pal Katie, but with regard to HDMI 2.2 and the recently announced specification, what can you kind of tip us off here? Get us set off on the right foot. Where did the specification come from? Where is it going? And what's an overview to make sure that we understand how important the specification is in terms of near term and then long term? I realize that I just asked you a very long-winded question that's going to take about 40 minutes for you guys to answer, but get us into a position where what follows will be a little bit easier to digest for those who haven't necessarily been following the play-by-play.
So since HDMI was created in 2001, it has gradually advanced as technology has advanced. When we first started on this journey, well over 20 years ago now, we were really into starting the path of digital connectivity for the audiovisual space. Before then, it was all analog. Over time, as technology improves, we think of many great things to do with it. Some of the things HDMI never conceived of was distribution. People were thinking, oh, well, people are going to plug in a Sony PlayStation to a TV and get this great experience from a point-to-point 1.5 meter cable. Well, now we're running huge distances, connecting stadiums with this type of technology. And we want high resolution. We want bigger screens. So technology is advanced. We're thinking about, well, how are we going to be using it? Can we use this in the medical field for remote surgery? Can we actually create this, Tom Cruise moment where we can have a real augmented experience in our space? So these are things that are pushing the boundary of technology, and over time, yes, it's mathematically sensible to double the bandwidth. So the headline thing for the HDMI 2.2 specification, and in relation to cables, is this Ultra 96, which stands for 96 gigabits per second transmission speed. Yeah. Ben, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. So I think the question was, what's the latest thing? What is this? What is this specification? 96 gig is the highlight. What we're going to see now is actually going to be new cabling requirements. So as James alluded to, there's going to be a new Ultra 96 specification. Ultra 96 certification for new cabling, which will involve, sorry, which will involve, much more stringent requirements on the cable parameters, electrical parameters, and also new connectors that will have much higher, much higher requirements for its tolerances, just because you need to get from 48 to 96. There's going to be, more lip syncing, functionality that enables devices to talk to each other to ensure lip sync makes sense, and lip sync happens, for when you do that distribution, and that distribution introduces latency. There's a bunch of things that are in there, and yeah, it's going to take us to that next step, and really bring HDMI connectivity possibilities aligned to kind of the things that are out there right now, which people are talking about, which is kind of the race between DisplayPort and HDMI and USB-C, and kind of how that's interacting with each other. So in terms of what the actual changes are in the protocol side, there really isn't very much change. There's still the baseline things are still the same thing. HDMI talks about it's still FRL, so it is still just FRL, it's still just the current protocol, and that's why it's an HDMI 2.2 instead of an HDMI 3. So I think there were some rumors back in, before this whole thing came out, there was some rumors that it was going to be an HDMI 3, it was going to be a change, but no, it's just HDMI 2.2. They're just basically tightening the screws a little bit, squeezing extra juice out of the protocol, and getting it into that 96 gig space. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So previously we were talking about 12 gig per channel times, well, when HDMI 2.1 was released, there was a new transmission method which Ben talked about. So we went from TMDS to FRL. So TMDS was a transmission method where you used 3 pairs plus a clock channel to make sure that everything was timed correctly. With FRL, we're talking about an embedded clock, but up to an FRL can choose 3 channels, 3 twisted pairs, or 4 twisted pairs to get to that 96. So, to go to that 24 gigabits per channel times 4 to get to 96. Now, what are the benefits of that? Well, TMDS used something called 8-bit, 10-bit encoding, and FRL uses 14, I think it's 14, 16-bit.
1680.
1680, yeah. Too many numbers to remember. So it's a lot more efficient at the way it's doing it, but the tolerances are finer. And that does mean new electronics, new cables, new transmission methods, and the handshake process gets even more complicated, and we're trying to do more things. So I think as a listener of this podcast, you can the themes that we generally bring to you is the overall conversation of be careful what you promise. Initially we started off talking about the possibility, and now we're getting into the engineering difficulties of what this system is actually going to start to struggle with. And when we start to introduce repeaters, and we start to increase the options and the signaling methods, we are now expanding this Chinese whispers scenario where every single component has the opportunity to drop a letter, add a letter, not say something. So unfortunately, this journey continues. But what is fortunate is we already know what we know. So it's important for us to understand those requirements and actually provide a positive, reliable outcome. And we'll get into that, as opposed to yes, there's this new 16K thing, but there's no TVs, there's no software, there's why are we promising these things? Oh, because the client wants the best and the greatest. It's not really deliverable right now. So there's the continued warnings, and technology does need to expand. So it is a great thing that it's offering. So yeah.
Right. Well, and I think your point about be careful about what you're promising. I think I'm sure we will reach a few stopping points during the course of the conversation where this comes back up of just do not do not overpromise. But I think in there also lies that's the cautionary title, but I think it also is the opportunity to make sure that you understand now as 2.2 comes into view and as the specifications are starting to be released and talked about more broadly, is make sure to level up your knowledge so that your baseline understanding is there, and as you're adding in this new information and are able to make it relatable not only for yourself for the work that you do, but when you're speaking to others. And I think as a communicator, this is one of the things that I'm always really interested in these conversations, particularly with you guys who can take this supremely complex and distill it down to very easily digestible bits. But, how do we make sure that the listeners of this podcast, who are very likely going to have a broad range of knowledge and tenure within the industry, you be sure and interject where you think that, for more information on this, or if you need just a little bit deeper dive, or if you want to go deep into the geek speak, definitely, as we go through the conversation, share that, because it is tough. And I think at the end of the day, it's one thing to learn it, but then we also have to be able to speak it as well, and make sure that the other side, whether we're in a sales position or communications as I am, making sure that the other side understands really not just what the thing is, but how the benefits will be relatable to them. And that's going to take some time here, I think, because there's going to be so much information flying about what it is and how it really is going to be an impact, which is sort of setting up for that next point of, I think we're ready to kind of go into, so where does this now for the industry itself? What's this mean for the industry?
One is that the specifications, which has now been released, is well over 600 pages long. There's a lot of detail, which talks about the communication protocol, the cable rise times, the how the electronics are signaled, how a handshake happens, all these tolerances, which have been clarified, tightened up, and that is all under NDA. So there's stuff that we can talk about specifically, but one of the good things is everyone can access not the specification itself, but actually all the information that's going to make the experience of HDMI 2.2 a great experience by going to HDMI.org. HDMI is very good at releasing what the new specs mean. Ben talked about, more advanced lip sync and that kind of thing. HDMI itself won't necessarily talk about the engineering that makes it work. They're going to leave the engineers themselves to do that. When specifications released, it makes clear the technology that we're trying to achieve. It means that everybody that's on the HDMI forum has agreed this is what we're going to proceed with what is now called HDMI 2.2. There's a new Ultra 96 cable that needs to be new. We know there are tolerances for that. So it's a starting point for which we can build the testing facilities. And that's really the first step. So once the ATCs, the authorized test centers, come on board, and they're reading this specification at the same time as it was released, they need to create all the equipment and how to test all these parameters. Yes, they have the knowledge of testing 2.1, but again, this is twice the capacity. Twice the capacity generally means much more expensive equipment, much tighter tolerances that they have to measure. In some cases, one of the tests, there's a specific lab that needs to be used that has virtually no emissions because the emissions are so low, it can't be measured in real life. And we know noise is one of the major contributors of signal dropout. How do we know this? Well, we know this through our networking experience. And when we're talking about 96 gigabits per second, and not 1 gig networking, we're talking 96 gigabits per second in real time with no buffering, right? That is actually really, really hard to achieve. It's 100 times, it's almost 100 times the capacity of most people's really, really good home internet. So let that sink in for a bit. So what we're trying to achieve here is a huge step. Yes, DisplayPort is at 80 gig and USB-C is at 40 gig and, all those things. But HDMI is now taking this quantum leap of doubling. So it's going to take some time to build the equipment. Once the equipment's built, then we can actually submit product for testing. What is Chords doing in the meantime? Well, we're evaluating what it is too. What are these connectors that need to be certified and produced? How are we going to assemble these? What are the tolerances? What are the tighter tolerances mean? How do we engineer this? So there's a lot of background work that can be done concurrently. But it doesn't mean that when the ATC is open, we're going to be able to get stuff certified, because there's over 1 billion devices that use HDMI now, over 1 billion. So they don't have millions of ATCs. I think there's like a dozen or so. So you got to get in the queue, and these tests take time. So one of the tests that's provided, you're also not part of. It's some of those tests aren't done at that ATC. You need to send it off to like a UL lab to get that done. And already UL are backed up by 3 months because they have to test toasters and kettles and ovens and Wi-Fi routers, because all of those are now subject to, because the speeds are getting faster and faster. So it's a combination of these that's going to cause a delay. And what does that mean? It means that we cannot promise HDMI 2.2 connectivity, I don't think, for at least 12 months. And then at that point, when you can actually buy a 2.2 source device, a sync or a TV, because projectors will be way, way beyond that, and a cable, that's only when you can experiment as an integrator. Are there currently any 48 gig fully specified 2.1 sources currently now?
Not many.
There are,
Yeah.
but there's not many. There's a laptop and there's an NVIDIA video card for gaming, but even devices like the Xbox, the PlayStation, most Blu-ray players, they're not operating at 48 gig. Video processors, but then you're doing upscaling and again adding complexity to the system. So there's those things that we need to. So
just
that's
to cut
the process.
just to cut it a different way, for those not aware of the entire HDMI process. So once the specs are released, which is recently that happened, the forum needs to get together and come up with something called a CTS, which is a certified test specification, which means translating those specifications of electrical properties into something that they can actually test. And that CTS will also state out the equipment that's required to test those things. Then after that, the what we call ATC, which is the authorized test centers, they need to then get their test lab approved by HDMI to test against that certification parameters. And only after that will we start to see certified HDMI Ultra 96 cables, or certified connectors, or certified equipment to run HDMI 2.2 or anything like that. So there's still quite a journey for us until we can start to see real life Ultra 96 cables and products. And even after that, then, and we're talking about application now, after that, we still need to wait for things to show up in terms of the content, in terms of equipment, driving 96 gig. There's a bunch of things that happens. So there's still a very, very long process, and that's what James was alluding to, which is, we're still right now embedding 48 gig and 48 gig ultra HDMI, ultra high speed HDMI cables was released kind of way back when. So I think our message to kind of the market right now is this is just the beginning. We're going to take some time. Now there are going to be some players out there, some market players out there who are going to start to say there are 96 gig capable cables, and our message to them is at this initial phase, don't buy into the hype, spec what you can use, and spec what you will actually be useful, and just watch the market for a little while longer. Yeah. But that's all just the process stuff. So we still got a long way to go. I think what's really exciting, and this is what James is excited about, is kind of what is the amazing things that we can do with HDMI and with HDMI 2.2 and 96 gig, and kind of where that leads us, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, Ben, that you raise, where it's very easy for us to buy into the hype, and when you buy into the hype, it's very, very high risk and very, very low return, and given there's still a long road ahead before testing can begin, anyone that's out there marketing this and saying that they have product, you need to be very, very careful about that capability, because without testing for it, there's no assurance of performance, and that's really the engineering behind it. Before we get into 96, I want people to realize what 2.1 can actually achieve, right? So from 2.1, there was this new transmission method called DSC. And many of you use that through, with HDBaseT devices or with extenders and things like that. So direct stream compression allows a lossless or close to lossless experience and a compression of 3:1. So even on the 2.1 standard, it allowed for up to 120 gigabits per second transmission speed using DSC. We can extrapolate that and have a think about, well, what does 96 gig mean for us? Well, 96 gig means over 300 gigabits per second. 2.1 allows for 8K. I'm reading this off our bandwidth guide, which we'll put on there. Again, there's just too many numbers to remember now. Gone are the days when I could remember all my friends' phone numbers. But 8K, 120 hertz at HDR12, so fully, Dolby Vision.
Dolby Vision.
At 422 chroma. That's a lot. That's a lot of experience. Think about that. 8K. Think of the devices that are out there at the moment that's available for 8K, 120 hertz, 12-bit color depth, and 422 color. There's like zero. And think about doubling that now. Think about now going to 16K and the resolution. And what does that mean for TV manufacturers and source manufacturers and even capturing the video content? We're going beyond arguably the resolution of normal film, normal 35mm film. We're starting to get beyond that, because when we scanned 8K, when we scanned Lawrence of Arabia in 8K, everyone, and reproduced it as digital, people were like, "Oh, I can't believe the colors. I can't believe the resolution. This remastered version is awesome." And we could extrapolate this immersive audio experience. So 16K is going to give us, a lot more, but we can also do many other things with it, such as, well, dual screen. How many of you now watch sports where you're watching, like I love Formula One, right? So, but whenever I'm watching Formula One, unfortunately for me, the Spanish channel for the Spanish Grand Prix has the full thing on there, and I love that, but I can't understand Spanish. So I listen to it on my digital radio. I listen to ABC broadcast. Okay, it might be slightly delayed by like 5 seconds, right? But I'm hearing it. But at the same time, I want to read I want to see the little wheel where all the cars are. So then I open YouTube on my iPad, and I have that as an experience. All right. So HDMI promises, well, what if we can have all of those together? What if I could have, because I'm Australian, Oscar Piastri's highly controversial Oscar Piastri screen of what he's driving, and then I can also have Lewis Hamilton at the same time. All right. So those are some of the those are some of the things that this, I hope, brings possible. I'm on RP23, and RP23 is a white paper that's being prepared by CEDIA, and it's chaired by Joel Silver and Jason Dustle, and it's to talk about how to create really awesome video in people's rooms, and we're talking about a lot of this technology and how to make it possible. But one of the things we always touch on is visual acuity. And visual acuity comes down to, very roughly, right, down to screen height. And at 4K, we're talking 1.5 times screen height. Well, what does that mean? It means that if your TV is 1 meter high, then your eye, the closest distance that you should be sitting is 1.5 times that, so 1.5 meters away. At 1080p, which is the low resolution, or 2K, it's 3 times. So if your TV is 1 meter high, then it's 3 times the screen height, so 3 meters away. So as resolution gets denser, it means that we can sit closer because our eyes cannot resolve the pixels that are on the screen until we get to that point. Now, 16K, so 8K presents a really interesting thing where it's middle ground. So it's, 0.75 times screen height. I can't reach the screen, but I'm kind of in everybody's way. I'm the dad with the coffee, standing in front of the screen, blocking everybody that's sitting on the couch. And everyone's like, just get out of the way. It's really annoying. And I don't think it actually contributes a lot. But 16K, now you're talking, right? You're 37.5 times screen, 0.375 times screen height. It means I can touch the screen. It means I can interact with the screen. It means now I can use the screen for education. It means the screen is actually like Minority Report. Think about that experience of being able to interact with your screen for education. And if the screen is big enough, multiple people can do that. And multiple people can have multiple sources. But that screen is still a single screen. So that source needs to come from elsewhere. So the way, we dreamt of this, like the CEDIA Technology Council dreamt of this, well beyond 10 years ago, where we would be putting panels. It's the Samsung, the Wall, and the Sony, those devices that are actually created together using multiple panels. There's a reason why they started there. And there's a reason why it's more accessible now. And there'll be a reason why it's even more accessible now. Instead of talking about resolution, how about we talk about, well, how big is this wall? Flip that. What type of experience do you want? And Ultra 96 makes that fully possible. It's not a beyond, it's not a between data rate. It gives us the full experience of pretty much based on how we record and how stories are created. I'm talking about documentaries and movies and TV shows, right? How content is created. Virtually an unlimited, based on current technology, virtually an unlimited reproduction experience in the home. And now consumers really have choice. And choice doesn't come just down to entertainment, but it comes down to experience. We had an article talking about medical. How can doctors become more efficient? Because everyone wants the best doctor, right? But the best doctor is not going to fly. If they're based in London, wouldn't it be better if they can do it remotely? Yes, but there's a lot of risks and there's a lot of certification. But video resolution, when you look at human anatomy, right, everything looks the same color. Everything looks the same. So it's one of those things where both resolution, color depth, the frames, how many frames per second we have, make a huge impact on the output. And the output is life or death here. So it's important. But as integrators, we all understand beyond those three things, we need to make it possible and we need to make it robust. So, I've ranted on this thing, but I think it's really exciting. I think to dream of the possibility and to think of that, but also come back down to, well, the reality of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's an important part of the conversation. I mean, it's as we're all here together because we get excited about the next big thing. And when we can see it, it's one thing. When we can start to feel it, it's completely different. And now as the specifications are coming into view, I mean, I'm sure there was a resounding, oh man, when you said the 26, 27 likelihood, but also too, as we have to learn from history and a little bit of timing and pacing between this specification being released and becoming mainstream product solutions. As an industry, we need time to react to that. We need time for our field to come up to speed on the knowledge base. We need products and manufacturers to come up to speed on interoperability and all of the things. And it just takes time. And, so I'm glad that you're putting an equal amount of reality on top of the ice cream cake that is the excitement of the announcement. But let's kind of go back to reality a little bit here. You touched on this earlier, but there are no certified products yet because this is just the tip of the iceberg. So there is a lengthy process. You talked through that, but what are some of the things that you would suggest to integrators or integration professionals to start getting prepared for what's coming? I look at, and as I ask you this, I look at this from a couple of things. Is we need the technical knowledge, but we also need to be able to repeat what we've learned to an audience that we're selling to or hoping to create a conversation with about the likelihood of the timeline and what the reality is for projects that do take a longer time to get all the way through the cycle. But then is there anything else that integration professionals should be thinking about that you're needing to incorporate now or just, putting as part of the layer? Lots of questions there, but as usual, there you go. I serve it up on the table. I'm going to push back and let you two, who have all of the answers, go ahead and deliver that up.
Yeah, I guess the answer to this question is it's no different to how I've always answered it. And that is, number one, when you put cable into a building, which is from a professional integrator's point of view, is more than not, right? Always allow for redundancy because the cable is really, my belief is the cable should last the life of the building. Because once it's in, you're not really going to pull it out. It's so much of a hassle to pull it out, right? And even when you want to try and get another cable in, still not going to. You might use it as a draw wire or something like that, but sometimes that's not possible, right? And that's the practicality of it. So, allowing for redundancy means using quality cable that for technology that we can't truly predict, because the reality of it is we still need the electronics. We talk about this Tom Cruise moment, right? But it still takes the electronics to be able to do it. At the moment, I'm still experiencing this thing across 3 different devices. It still takes those manufacturers to come together and agree that this is a good thing. So whilst I desire that experience, the reality of it is, that's going to advance and companies will be acquired and this technology will glacially come together. But, how do I allow for redundancy? Well, the world is at Cat6a. So you might use that for power. You might use that for IP distribution, compressed distribution. If you want to go uncompressed, then you're really looking at dark fiber. So when you put fiber in, fiber typically, multi-mode fiber, you're typically talking a maximum of 40 gig. So, HDMI's at 96 gig, so I'd probably put at least 4, dark fibers in at point to point. So those things can last the life of the building. Ideally, what you would want to be doing is putting in conduit, as much of it as you can without cutting as much of the timber away, without sacrificing the structure of the building itself, so that you can retrofit.
I've just
My
got this
clients
image
never
in my head of just
complained.
like opening
Yeah.
up my wall and there's like conduits everywhere.
Yes. I've seen that happen. It's like, and you- I one of the electricians that I worked with made a really bad joke, which was, well, they can't complain if they die.
So bad. So bad. We shouldn't
It's
be
very
laughing.
bad. But that's what we've been saying to people: put the draw wires in, make things, future ready, because there is no such thing as future proofing. And even longer HDMI cables, we've had this happen before, when we're going from 576 to 1080p, from 1080p to 4K. There was this delay in terms of like putting cables in. One of the things we think will happen is that HDMI cables will need to be thicker, because they'll need to have more substantial electronics to drive these higher resolutions. And what that means is you need to be able to allow for power somewhere, power at the TV side or power at the source side, or both, because we're now getting into this realm of, well, I can't go at 200 miles an hour if I don't have a turbocharged V8. Can't. Well, some people will try, but the practicalities of it is bigger, more powerful, more performance. So because we can't make it any more lighter weight. So there is the efficiency thing where we're getting to so low voltages that to get performance at that level, we just really need more of that. So that's kind of allowing for the future, but coming back to reality in terms of the practicalness of integration.
Another thing that I think is important for people to realize is that just like what happened with 48 gig and this ultra high speed space, is that the infrastructure came, or the cabling came first, was widely available first, and then slowly and slowly, even today, slowly and slowly does the content start to come. And just before the content is the equipment and the capabilities for an NVIDIA card to output 48 gig. So there's going to, so like we were saying before, don't buy into the hype at the initial stage. Once certified product is out, and the market starts to talk about Ultra 96 as a space that everybody wants to be into, then when you're designing or integrating home environments, you can start putting in this product, and making sure that it's future ready for when the equipment and the content starts to move into that 96 gig space. So that's one thing to do, and because you need to get buildings ready for this kind of content, you need to ensure that there's the piping, or there's the cables that are unfortunately stuck in the wall. You need to make sure that those things are ready, but only after we're made sure that that cabling is something that can actually support it, and that's tested and certified to support it. So that's what I would suggest to people, to kind of just watch it, wait for it to be certified, wait for a product to be certifiable, then go and do it. But then also build for 5-10 years down the road, because as James correctly put it, it is important to that the cabling product that you use is useful for the life of the building. Which brings us to a really important point with regards to kind of just quality. James, you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Something.
so yeah. So emissions is one of the key things with ultra high speed and ultra 96. Um, and I'm talking about electrical interference here. It's very important, and these are not simple tests that you can actually just buy um, uh, a tester and plug it in on site. Uh, Equipment installation is getting more and more dense. What that means is we've got more and more noise within this metal shell that we call a rack, and that is going to cause dropouts when your client has the best intentions and upgrades their network to Wi-Fi 7 or Wi-Fi 8 or whatever the next thing is, or puts their phone on top of the rack, depending on where you've located, and the phone rings, that may cause enough interference for your experience to drop out if you're not using certified product. And the point about certified product and certification is reasonably easy to determine. And why it's important is because of long-term reliability. Certification, we've talked about it before. Go to hmi.org. There's a page that lists all the people that are adopters of HMI technology. It's very easy to mislabel something. I can just call anybody anything, and it not represent the 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 product itself, right? So anyone can call a cable a ultra high speed cable, right? But that performance has to be determined by HDMI licensing or DPL, or it has to be someone trusted third party that does that testing. If you self test, it's very easy for companies to just kind of like circumvent or make compromises on that testing. And why is that important? Because, well, ultra high speed certification, and we're not even talking 96 here, has been around for quite some time. I don't remember how many years now. Ben might be able to tell me, but at least 5 years. We still don't have devices that we can plug in on a regular basis that can test that bandwidth. And the infrastructure has already been in. I hear so many stories of integrators going, oh, this cable's promised this, doesn't work. It's got HDMI is more than that 96. It's the handshake, it's the signaling, it's the EDID, it's getting more and more complicated, which certification does most of the ironing out. And when you implement something that's not certified, you're really putting yourself out, because when the new devices come in and they don't work, you'll need to be fixing those problems. One thing that a lot of manufacturers are really good at is giving longer and longer warranties. That means that puts you out to fix the problem, because if you put that in and the cable has got a 5-year warranty and the latest and greatest, which everybody wants because they want to impress their friends, right, gets put in and it doesn't work, well, you're kind of on the hook to replace it. Sure, the manufacturer's on the hook to give you another cable, but they're not on the hook to pull the cable out and put the new one in. You are. And then you're in that awkward position where, oh, I kind of should be charging the client, but they spend $200,000 for me. Can I even ask this? And they're the little things. And if you have them happen in multiple locations, then your business really starts to suffer. Like not just financially, but mentally, because you've got these high net worth individuals that are no longer recommending your services.
You lose trust.
Yeah.
Your brand loses its authority, and you lose the client's trust in a way that you may not get back. And I think there's multiples that become mind blowing when you're talking about this in a commercial application versus a
Yeah.
residential application. I mean, that's just the considerations here are really that cannot be understated. And I think this is a perfect time, since this is a collaborative podcast episode of which Chords is providing the talent here. You guys do get to do a little bit of a commercial and a plug for the brand. And I think now's a really good time, because you've led up to this, and while the conversation wasn't intended to lead up to this point in this moment, the next thing that is said. But I think it's important that with the quality conversation, let's talk then about how Chords has built the brand to resolve that from the start, with the intensity and the integrity of the testing done at the factory long before anything even leaves, that you guys stand very firm on. Pick up on that if you would, and just carry the Chords torch for a minute, and share with the audience again the quality component and the commitment to that from a Chords brand standard.
Yeah, so let me speak first on that, and I'll hand over to Ben for the manufacturing side, because he looks after that side. The first thing really in anything is you need to get to the fundamentals of you need to understand what we're trying to achieve. And I assert the only way you can do that is really when you can have the specification and also the CTS of what we're testing to. From that point, we need to engineer everything from the ground up. You need to understand what's possible and then build the bridge. Not go to a factory, which a lot of manufacturers, there's many brands out there, they go to a factory and they just trust that factory to say, hey, we can do this. And I'm not saying that you cannot make products that way. But if you're going to do that, then you need to have your own people on the production line. You need to have test equipment that tests that. So after you create the product, then you need to do a lot of extensive testing. You need to try that product in many, many different combinations. There's many different brands out there. There's many different displays. There's many different sources. And you need to try all the different parameters before you can and then you need to continually refine. And then the final point is, well, once you've test, then you submit. And then you find out if you pass. If you fail, then you have to resubmit. And those things have to happen at third party, because, like I said, that even the specification is over 600 pages. The CTS is going to be even more extensive in terms of its parameters and requirements. And there's all these tolerances. And then I'll let Ben talk about our production line quality assurance and things like that.
Yeah. So I think we've alluded to a couple of points during the conversation. You've got to make cables that last for the life of the building. And you have to kind of ensure that whatever it is that we kind of promote to our customers, whatever it is that you install, has the headspace and also the headroom, and the capabilities to kind of allow the integrator to install something that can kind of last for the life of the building and take part in all that. These things are some of the things that we think about, but at Chords, we kind of think about just kind of quality in general. And, we think about building for longevity, and we think about building for precision, and also building for consistency. So every single cable that comes off the production line is 100% application tested. Every single cable that comes off the production line is we make sure that the experience of that cable is going to be the same, regardless of which one you pick up. And that experience is always exactly as we say it's going to perform. And that comes from kind of manufacturing methodologies where, we reduce a lot of the variability in what we do. insofar as like we even make tools, we even cut tools for the way the product gets coiled up inside the bag. These are kind of the extensive nature that we kind of go to in order to do that kind of stuff. So, um, you know, yeah, and this is just kind of who we are and what we do in terms of this in manufacturing cables for integrators. And yeah, it's a tough journey. People don't like to do it sometimes. It definitely makes our product a little bit at a premium, but sometimes that premium does count towards kind of thing. You know it's definitely what we believe is actually the proper thing to do for the greater good. We believe that you don't want to be buying HDMI product. You don't want to be buying 5 HDMI products because the first one failed and then you got to keep replacing it. You want to buy just one so that you don't throw away, 4 of them. And yeah, these are the kind of themes that we
Yeah,
think
no,
about when it comes to manufacturing.
yeah, our processes are repeatable,
Yeah.
exactly repeatable. The tolerances are exactly repeatable. We automate and machine make as much as we can because what that does is it allows us to be as exact as possible. I always use the example of a good steak at a good restaurant. You go to a restaurant for the first time, you have a steak, and it's amazing. It's the best steak you've ever had. So you recommend your friends. The worst experience is when your friends go there. It's okay. Right? That's not what you want to hear. You want to take your friends there and you say, like, everyone's steak is like, wow, okay. Steak comes from various different parts of a cow. It's cooked by various different people. But when it comes out all exactly the same and it's an extremely good experience, that's the sign of a good
Yeah.
restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it raises an interesting point, which is from an industry perspective, we have always been at the front end of innovation and technology and pushing the envelope and what's possible. And in there has always been a direct relationship with cost and time, and which doesn't make us unique by any means. But I think when you put those things together in the context of this conversation, there's the sense of time, which is as an integration professional, you're being paid for your time, your talent as well, but for your time. For every minute of your time or your team's time that is wasted trying to identify the root cause of an issue on a job site, regardless of your history with that client, right now in that moment when there's an outage or an experience that is not as it should be or was not as it was promised, every minute is potentially a nick against your great reputation. And when you think about it from that perspective, you can kind of hear my scruffy voice comes out when I think about this. It's like, why would you let the decision of one of the most basic elements of every project, cable infrastructure, why would you let cost of that product be such an overwhelming part of the decision that you're willing to let your reputation be completely undermined because you can't find the answer to a project that is not performing as it was intended? That concept of chasing ghosts because the foundation wasn't laid properly is to me is just it's insanity. But I get it because it's also then there's sourcing quickly. I need to save time. I've got to get this order in for my cables. I'm just going to go with this vendor who has this line, and I'm going to hope for the best. We all know what hope introduces into projects, right? So to me, it has always made good sense that when you're talking about foundational aspects of projects like cable infrastructure, get it right here. And you have far less reason to worry about the type of ghosts that are going to haunt you for the life of the project, or as you guys mentioned, the life of the building. You think about the life of a building, and that is huge. And you should want to retain a relationship with that building and get returning business off of it rather than get me off this job and I never want to go back because it brings you joy. Bring you joy because it works well, it performs well, and everybody in the building's happy and they want you to come back to add on, not fix. So, I always introduce a little bit of this element of, from your pal Katie during these conversations, but regardless of my relationship with Chords, it just makes good sense to really scrutinize every aspect of the project, and particularly at the foundational level, make decisions that are based on time and the value of it, not necessarily the price and how low you can get it. And I think that's, from my perspective, that's the best thing that I can contribute to the conversation, because everything else is so much more complex than my brain can process.
Just on that point, Katie. Just on that point, we've got to we'll put the interview probably in the notes as well. There's a great interview that Eric Bodley does with Millennium AV. And Eric asks the question of, well, yes, we're all looking at price for projects, but how many HDMI cables do you actually use on a project? And it probably amounts to 10, 20, let's say 20, right? So what's really the difference between a $20 cable and a $40 cable? Well, it's at most $400. What else can you spend $400 on to get the best in class performance? A projector, TV? Well, you can upgrade maybe one of them, but not all of them. And here you're upgrading all of them for the life of the building. So that's how we focus. That's why we focus on the ISO standards, the fire and certification, and we really want to take that guessing game away from the integrator, because it's the integrator that's at the forefront of trying to make technology possible. And that kind of flies against my personal objective of making a connected world that works. Because functionality and workability brings delight and experience and conversation and sharing and some of the amazing things of being a human being, of sharing your life with others. That connected world that works is really, really important to me personally, and it's a foundation of what we do here at Chords, so that you guys can go out there as integrators, as professionals, and go out there and do your stuff. And we want to hear about it, and we want to share those stories too.
That, my friend, is a beautiful segue into the closing element of this podcast. And so, again, I want to thank you both for making the time for the conversation and for helping level up some of the knowledge, introduce some cautionary tales, get us set up for what's happening next, and also to providing suggestions for integrators that are both thinking of projects now and also a little bit further down the line. James, if people wanted to find, follow, and connect with you, how would they do that? Ben, same question for you. Of course, we know that all roads lead to chords.com, but to get to know you guys a little bit more, where can people find and follow you?
Well, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. There's only like one of me that looks like me. There's a number of surgeons and scientists around too, but James at Chords there's only one. You can find the Chords social media. We're on Instagram, and we're on X, and we're on Facebook, and there's the socials, and of course on our website. If you want to reach out to me personally, my email is james@chords.com. Very easy, and me and my team, we're always happy to answer questions, help you out technically. We'd love you to be a Chords customer, but that is not a condition of you reaching out to us. We really do want to make that connectivity possible. And if we make your life better, then and we can earn that right, then we'd love you to try some of the Chords products and see if it benefits you. And if it does, continue. If it doesn't, then we've had a great exchange.
And for me, it's I'm on LinkedIn, so Benjamin Yeh, and I'm the only one that works at Chords, I think. Or just follow the Chords handles at Chords Global. And we'll definitely be able to interact with you on all the social media channels.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, my
Yeah.
friends. Well, once again, thank you. As I mentioned, all roads do lead to Chords.com. So from the listener side of things, if you were to visit Chords, KORDZ.com, you'll find a wealth of product information as well as industry information and what's ahead. So articles about HDMI 2.2, for instance, you'll find are there, as well as USB-C, outdoor cable infrastructure considerations, et cetera, et cetera. So not just a provider of product, but also a provider of information, education, and inspiration. All those things can be found on Chords.com. So definitely have a look at the site and reach out accordingly. I all too often hear from the integration community, I've been really meaning to try out those Chords cables, and I haven't done it yet. Thanks for reminding me. And this is no kidding. I hear this all the time. So this is my closing reminder of, if that's you and that sounds familiar, now's the time to get involved, because as you've heard in this conversation today, there's a lot that goes into making a quality cable, and that's the kind of cable that you want in your project, so you're not chasing ghosts and wasting your time or your customers' time or money. So there you go. With that, I will let you all drift off into the sunrise, the sunset, or whatever it is you're doing as you're listening to this podcast. Until next time, take good care. If there's a topic you'd like to talk about, just reach out and let's have that conversation. Until then, do what you do, take good care, and we'll catch you on another episode. Bye-bye.